Choir class the other day and a student asked me what the highest note I could sing was, and as a soprano I couldn't resist that question. And as I demonstrated, one of my kids was like, what if, like, Miss Folk, what if you could sing opera? Like, this was the funniest thing she'd ever heard of. And I told them I am literally trained in opera. Oh, the laughter that erupted. They were like, what? You can sing opera? Like, do it right now. Like, do it right now. And I declined, but it made me realize that students have no idea what goes into being a music education major, and probably most people don't either. Which then made me reflect and realize that even when I wanted to be a music education major, I don't think I realized all that went into it. So I'm going to talk about the things that I did as a vocal music education major. It should be fairly standard across the board, but there might be a few discrepancies along the way. So the first thing is an hour of voice lessons every single week. Most of the time, and maybe this has changed since I've been in school, but most of the time your training is geared towards classical and opera. There might be the occasional musical theater piece or something else, but most of the time they're trying to form technique through classical and opera pieces. With that, at the end of the semester comes a jury. So you're singing pieces in German, Italian, French, English, Latin, Russian, Spanish, whatever they can come up with, basically. And you sing and they sort of give you a grade and let you know if you pass or not. Which then brings me to a couple semesters of something called diction. So we have to learn how to pronounce every word in certain foreign languages. So we may not necessarily know what it means, but we could look at German words and say, yes, this is how you say it. Or look at Italian words and say, yes, this is how you say it, because you have to be able to sing it. A lot of people don't realize that as a music education major, you have to take a class called performance attendance. And that is 0 hours, but yes, you still have to go, and you go and you attend performances for a grade. Either pass or you fail. And I think we had to go to 14 a semester. Along with your voice lessons or whatever your primary instrument is, you have to be in an ensemble. I did chorale, I did choral society, I did women's chorus, just depending on the semester. This wasn't a class, but I also was in and music directed our women's a cappella group. Because I'm a weirdo, I also did wind ensemble and concert band because I play the oboe and I didn't want to let those skills go. We also have to take, for me, it was 3 semesters of music history. So you go all the way back to literally the beginning of music ever, all the way to, I don't really remember where the cutoff was. I know there was a rock and roll history course. I didn't get to take it. I wish I had, because I teach that now. But there's a lot of listening involved, a lot of learning about the different time periods and how they fit into history and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of identifying songs just by hearing a snippet of it, which reminds me, I also took opera literature, which was super fun. It probably doesn't sound fun, but it really was. We just analyzed and took apart and watched operas and learned about the history of those. I took something called vocal pedagogy. This was not required at the time. I firmly believe it should be, because it was all about your voice and how to train people on their voice. And as a choir director, that's super important. I had to take 4 group piano classes and then an accompanying class. And if you're my student, you're wondering, well then Miss Volk, how are you still trash at piano? Group piano was all about learning the proper technique and learning which fingers go where. And my teacher used to get mad at me because I would try to play by ear, so he would turn down the sound on the keyboard and be like, now do your test. The good news is by the time we got to accompanying, it was kind of like, just make it work. And that I could do. The bane of my existence and most people's existence is music theory. We have to take 4 of those, probably the hardest classes I've ever taken, but that's just because I'm really bad at music theory. There was also a class called Form and Analysis, which is basically a 5th music theory class. I also did choral arranging, where you don't necessarily write your own music, but you write it for a certain group. Aside from voice, there are also tech classes. So string tech, where you learn to play a string instrument. Brass tech, you learn to play the brass instruments. I took double reed and woodwind. Some people take percussion tech. Because something else people don't realize is, even though I'm a vocal major, I could teach band or orchestra legally. So you have to learn about that stuff too. Then there was choral materials and choral methods. One of those classes is mostly looking at the music that you could teach, and then the other is how to teach those pieces. There were also 2 really intense semesters of conducting. And for us, it was less about like, this is a 1, this is a 2, this is a 3, this is a 4, because yes, each of those beats actually mean something. But it was about, how do you rehearse a choral ensemble effectively? And that's what made it very difficult. We had to take acoustics because we had to learn about like sound. I'm not even to the education classes yet. And I'm definitely not including things like gen eds that you have to take anyway. So we had classes like teaching elementary music, teaching secondary music, educational psychology. I know there's probably more I'm forgetting, but I highlight this because I don't think people really know what goes into being a music teacher. And it's easy to be like, well, what do you do all day? You just sing? Oh yeah, woo, that sounds really hard. But your music teachers basically have a double major, because they have an education section and then they have a music performance section. And because for some reason when people come to my performances, they would still come up to me and be like, you can sing. I would hope so.